How's it going, everyone? I hope you're all doing good. Today I have for you what is probably one of the most requested tutorials, which is how to draw hair. And I've been meaning to do this for a while, I just haven't got round to it. I've been preoccupied with other projects and drawings, but I've managed to throw something together that you should hopefully find useful. And I've chosen an example that gives us an idea of both short hair and long hair, even though the techniques are pretty much the same for both. But I hope you found this useful and we'll get right into it.
So first of all, I'm going to roughly sketch out some outlines to give myself an idea of scale, but I'll probably end up adjusting it as I go. What I want to do today is focus on the technique of drawing realistic hair, and so for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll be using an image to refer to. I'll be covering just one example here, and then in some future videos we can take a look at other styles of drawing hair, including different hairstyles and textures. In this one, however, I've gone for something that's a mix between long hair and short hair so that we are able to get an understanding of both. What we need to pay attention to is the method of recreating the details, textures, shadows and highlights, and eventually that will all come together and give us a realistic looking hair appearance. So here on screen I'm just starting from one point of this drawing, which might be an unusual starting point, but if you are familiar with how I work, then you'll know that I start from one point and usually just render it fully as I go. When we eventually create and draw hair without reference, then you'll see how I take a slightly different approach. I'm also using a 2B pencil, always sharpening this and making sure I'm creating very fine lines. I think hair can sometimes be confusing to draw because people see it as being these separate strands of hair, and so they can just end up drawing a collection of lines. But realistically, the hair will bend and flow in different directions. Individual hairs will come together and form larger areas which include shadows and highlights, and I think the highlights are one of the most important things. Naturally, hair reflects light, and so having that contrast between the light and darker areas will give a better impression. So let me try and break down what it is I'm doing here. Instead of drawing individual hairs, I tend to draw what I see, including everything as a whole. I draw around the highlights, leaving them on show whilst filling in the shadows. I'm creating small marks with the pencil and making different pencil shades. It takes a long time, so you have to be patient and work out how to draw parts of the hair. There is some separation there. For instance, sometimes I make a dark line between two parts and this gives a sense of that separation. As long as this is present, then it should always be able to be recognised as hair. So through this video I'll be going in and out of time-lapse so you can get a closer look and see what this process is like in real time. I'll be putting some more real-time footage on the Patreon page, so there's a link in the description if you want to check that out. Through drawing this, I was sharpening the pencil quite often because it is essential to keep it sharp so that you can create finer details and lines. One thing that's quite challenging when drawing hair like this is the way that each of the hairs overlap and curve around each other. When this happens, the hairs that come together can appear as one shape and the separation will be there, but it could be created as one highlight with a shadow underneath, or sometimes the shadow might not be that dark, it could be a lighter shadow drawn underneath it, just hinting at that separation between separate hairs. As I'm working from a reference in this drawing, I'm able to study the image and recreate these values. From studying the image, I look at how the hairs travel down and interact with others. It needs to look natural, and so having a reference there will help you get an idea of that. This hairstyle includes a lot of hair hanging and curving down over the face. You can see that the parts behind the hair, hanging in the foreground, are a lot darker, and this helps to bring these parts of the hair further forward. Again, this is mainly due to that contrast between the lighter and the darker shades. Sometimes it might help to draw in the outlines of the highlights, and then you can just fill in the shadows around it. You can then lightly shade in and add more pencil tones to the highlights. You'll probably see me doing that quite often in this drawing, and when it comes to shading in the highlighted areas, try to create a gradual gradient in shade so that you have the lighter grey shades eventually fading out to the whiter and the most highlighted parts. As I'm making these dark shadows in between parts of the hair and before I shade them in, I normally create some rough outlines indicating some lighter parts that I want to leave out. Then when I start to shade in these areas under shadow, I'll make these outlined parts a bit lighter, and so then you'll see these fine hairs in the shadows and it will look a lot more realistic. If I'm going to give some general advice when it comes to drawing hair, I'd say focus on the direction of the lines you are drawing in relation to the others. This includes looking at how you create a separation between them, usually by placing the shadows alongside the highlights and producing a contrast in shades. Also, I'd say focus on the shades and turns you are making with the pencil. A lot of these highlights will need some shading so that it naturally flows into the darker areas. Always try to keep the pencil sharp and work with the point of the pencil. And another thing that might be worth me mentioning is how you can make use out of an eraser. I have a Mono Zero eraser which is useful for accurately creating highlights. In this example I didn't use it for that, as I was creating outlines for the highlights and just leaving them blank, but normally going over with an eraser is a good technique for making areas lighter. I'd also say to think about the direction you draw in the hairs. You'll notice a small difference between the longer parts of the hair and the shorter parts. I find the shorter parts are more simple to draw. Naturally, we create lines in the direction that the hair is going in. On the side of the head, the hair will have a lot more direction in comparison to the longer parts on top of the head, which are dropping down more loosely. But overall, I think I've pretty much covered this process and the things that I try to consider when I create drawings like this. When it comes to drawing hair, it's a similar method to drawing facial hair and long beards, things like that, which I'll eventually cover in future videos, and I hope this one was useful for you.
So there we go, that's an example of how to draw hair, and obviously this isn't the only way. There's probably other artists out there that have many other techniques and alternative methods to draw something like this that might even be more useful for you. But this is the way that I'd go about drawing it, and I know that a lot of you comment on the videos asking me to cover how to draw hair and things because you like the way that it appears in my drawings. So I hope this covered a bit of it for you. Obviously we'll cover hair and beards and things like that in future tutorials again, but yeah, I hope you found this one useful. Thank you for watching, have yourself a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.